A secret draft peace plan between the United States and Russia has shaken Europe. A 28-point proposal, leaked to the press, suggests Ukraine may be asked to surrender territory, limit its military, and abandon NATO membership. But there's one problem: Europe itself has been left out of the talks. The revelation has sent shockwaves from Brussels to Berlin, raising a question that defines the continent's future. Can a lasting peace in Europe be forged without Europe? The draft, prepared by American negotiators, was presented to President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It outlines territorial concessions to Russia, restrictions on Ukraine's future military, and a halt to NATO accession. In exchange, Ukraine would receive security guarantees, though the details remain vague. This clandestine diplomacy, conducted far from the corridors of the European Union, is being seen not just as a diplomatic slight, but as a direct challenge to the security architecture that has maintained stability on the continent for decades. The war in Ukraine is a European war, fought on European soil, with consequences that reverberate through every European capital. Yet, in this critical moment, the continent's primary stakeholders find themselves relegated to the sidelines, watching as their fate is negotiated by others. The proposal's core tenets, sacrificing Ukrainian land for a fragile truce, are reminiscent of dark chapters in Europe's past, stirring anxieties that history may be poised to repeat itself. For European leaders, this isn't merely about protocol. It's about sovereignty, security, and the very soul of the European project. President Zelenskyy has not rejected the plan outright. He insists Ukraine needs a real peace, one that cannot be broken by another invasion. Kyiv is studying the proposals carefully while signaling red lines. No recognition of Russian sovereignty over occupied territories, and no compromise on Ukraine's independence. For Ukraine, the stakes are existential. The nation has fought with unparalleled resilience for its right to exist as a sovereign European nation. The government in Kyiv is caught in an impossible position, desperate for an end to the bloodshed, yet unwilling to accept a peace that would institutionalize Russian aggression and leave Ukraine permanently vulnerable. Zelenskyy's cautious response reflects this dilemma. He must navigate the immense pressure from his Western allies while answering to a population that has sacrificed everything. Any deal that trades territory for a temporary cessation of hostilities would be seen as a betrayal of the thousands who have died defending every inch of Ukrainian soil. Therefore, Ukrainian diplomats are walking a tightrope, engaging with the proposals while reinforcing their non-negotiable principles. Full territorial integrity within its 1991 borders and the freedom to choose its own alliances. European leaders are alarmed. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas warned that peace without Europe's involvement will not last. Diplomats in Brussels argue the plan leans too heavily toward Moscow's demands. For Europe, exclusion from negotiations is not just an insult, it's a threat to its own security. The sentiment is echoed across the continent. French President Emmanuel Macron has long advocated for strategic autonomy, a vision where Europe takes charge of its own defense and foreign policy. This secret US-Russia track runs directly counter to that ambition, reinforcing a narrative of European dependency on Washington. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, leading Europe's largest economy, faces immense domestic pressure to ensure any settlement is just and sustainable. The fear in Berlin, Paris, and other capitals is that a deal brokered without their input will fail to address the root causes of the conflict, creating a frozen conflict that could destabilize Europe's eastern flank for generations. The proposed limitations on Ukraine's military and its formal neutrality are seen as a victory for Vladimir Putin, rewarding his war of aggression and emboldening him to make further demands. This is not peace, they argue, but a dangerous precedent. If Europe is sidelined, the consequences could be severe. Russia may exploit divisions between Washington and Brussels, NATO's credibility could weaken, and Ukraine's security guarantees would be meaningless without European support. Analysts warn this could repeat history, like the Yalta Conference of 1945, where Europe's future was decided without European voices. At Yalta, the leaders of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union carved up a post-war Europe, sealing the fate of millions behind an iron curtain. The parallels are chilling. A bilateral US-Russia agreement over Ukraine would signal that, once again, the continent's destiny is being determined by external powers. Such a move could fracture the transatlantic alliance, the very bedrock of European security for over 70 years. If Washington is seen as prioritizing a quick, albeit flawed, resolution over the principles of sovereignty and a united front with its allies, trust will erode. Russia has historically thrived on sowing discord within the West. A divided Europe and a strained NATO are central to its strategic goals. Furthermore, any security guarantees offered to Ukraine would be hollow without the full political, economic, and military backing of the European Union, which has provided the bulk of financial and humanitarian aid to Kyiv. This is more than a peace plan. It's a test of Europe's sovereignty. Will the continent be a co-author of its future or a bystander? As negotiations continue, the question remains, can peace be built without Europe at the table? The European Union has evolved from a post-war economic community into a geopolitical actor. A union of 450 million people with a combined economy that rivals any in the world. It has imposed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, welcomed millions of Ukrainian refugees, and supplied billions in aid. To exclude this entity from the most critical security negotiation in a generation is to deny reality. The crisis in Ukraine has forced Europe to confront its vulnerabilities and accelerate its quest for a more unified and assertive foreign policy. Being excluded now could either shatter that ambition or, conversely, galvanize it. European leaders are now mobilizing, holding emergency sessions, and coordinating a unified response to ensure their voices are not just heard, but are central to the process. The message is clear. A durable peace cannot be dictated. It must be built collectively with the people most affected at its heart. The war in Ukraine has already reshaped Europe. Now the peace process may do the same. For Europe, being ignored is not an option. Because without Europe, there can be no lasting peace. The continent has paid a heavy price for the conflict, from the energy crisis to the economic strain and the profound sense of insecurity. A resolution that fails to secure Ukraine's future as a free and democratic state will inevitably become Europe's future problem. A peace treaty that legitimizes aggression will only invite more of it. The path forward demands a unified front, one where Washington and Brussels work in lockstep with Kyiv. Only a settlement that respects international law, upholds Ukrainian sovereignty, and involves the full participation of European nations can hope to bring a just and enduring end to this devastating war. The decisions made in the coming weeks will determine not only the fate of Ukraine, but the security and relevance of Europe for the 21st century. Do you think Europe should have a seat at the peace table? Tell us in the comments below.